Justice and Prejudice: The Struggle for Fairness and Equality. In the early 1960s, a small southern town lay divided by invisible lines drawn by race, privilege, and power. Nestled amidst sprawling cotton fields and dirt roads, the town bore the scars of a deeply unequal society. Justice in this town was often a privilege of the powerful, not a right of the marginalized. At the center of this fractured community stood Judge Thomas Warden, a man known for his stoicism and intellect but also quietly scrutinized for his ability, or inability, to transcend the biases of his time. One crisp autumn morning, the courtroom became the epicenter of the town's tensions. Samuel Carter, a young white man in his late 20s, stood accused of assaulting Elijah Turner, an African-American farmer. Elijah, a hard-working, soft-spoken man, had spent years tending to his modest piece of land, battling both the elements and the systemic barriers that limited his success. In contrast, Samuel was the son of the Carters, a wealthy and influential family that owned acres of prime farmland and held sway over local politics. The incident had ignited a firestorm. Samuel, claiming Elijah had encroached on his family's land, had been seen attacking the farmer in broad daylight. Witnesses recounted how Samuel, fueled by anger and arrogance, had left Elijah bloodied and barely conscious. Yet, for many in the white community, Samuel's actions were seen as justified, a defense of property and tradition. For the town's black residents, the attack was a stark reminder of their precarious place in society and the violence they often endured in silence. The courtroom was packed that morning, divided as clearly as the town itself. On one side sat the town's black families, their faces reflecting a mix of hope and fear. On the other side, white townsfolk, particularly the elite, exuded confidence that the trial was little more than a formality. At the front sat the Carters, their patriarch staring intently at Judge Warden, as if daring him to rule against his son. Judge Warden presided over the trial with his usual calm demeanor, though inside he felt the weight of every eye on him. This case, he knew, was about more than Samuel and Elijah. It was about the very fabric of the town and whether the scales of justice could ever balance in such a place. The prosecution presented a strong case. Several witnesses, both black and white, testified to seeing Samuel confront Elijah and later strike him with a wooden rod. Elijah, though still recovering from his injuries, gave a moving testimony about his struggle to provide for his family in a world that seemed determined to keep him down. He spoke with quiet dignity, refusing to let anger cloud his words. The defense, however, leaned heavily on the Carters' influence. Samuel's lawyer portrayed him as a victim of circumstances, a young man pushed to his limits by what he claimed were Elijah's attempts to steal land that wasn't his. Subtle appeals to racial prejudice were woven into the defense's arguments, aiming to stoke the jury's biases without making them overtly obvious. As the trial unfolded, Judge Warden found himself wrestling with his own conscience. Born and raised in the same town, he understood its unspoken rules. He had seen how justice often bent to the will of the powerful, how the voices of the marginalized were drowned out by tradition and fear. And yet, he had taken an oath to uphold the law, to seek truth and fairness. The jury deliberated for hours, their faces strained as they returned to the courtroom with their verdict. Guilty, the foreman announced. A hush fell over the room before erupting into chaos. Cheers of relief mingled with angry outbursts. Judge Warden raised his gavel, demanding order, but the tension in the room was palpable. In his sentencing, Judge Warden addressed the courtroom with a rare display of emotion. This town has long stood divided, its walls built on fear and prejudice. But justice must be blind to wealth, race, and power. If we are to grow, if we are to heal, we must hold every man accountable for his actions, regardless of his name or heritage. His words echoed in the silent room, challenging everyone present to reflect on their role in perpetuating the town's divisions. Samuel was sentenced to prison, marking a rare moment of accountability in the town's history. The verdict sent ripples through the community. For the first time, many dared to hope that justice could prevail, even in a system riddled with flaws. After the trial, Judge Warden sat alone in his chambers, staring at the scales of justice carved into his desk. He felt both relief and unease. The road to fairness and equality was long, and this trial was only the beginning. But for now, he had taken a step toward bridging the gap between justice and prejudice.